Yo, what is going on, guys? Flashverse here, and welcome back to another video on The Flash Season 7. And this will be my review and breakdown for The Flash Season 7, Episode 3, titled Mother, which is also the episode which we originally would have seen as the Season 6 finale if the whole shutdown didn't happen. But starting off, giving you guys my quick initial thoughts. You guys know, Season 7 kicked off really strongly in my opinion. I really loved what we got for the first 2 episodes. I gave the premiere like a 9 out of 10 I think it was. And then for episode 2, I gave a 10 out of 10. So going into this episode, I was really excited about how this episode would play out due to how strong the past 2 episodes were. So I was confident and I was so excited that this episode was going to deliver that same quality as well. And I was interested to see how they would wrap up that Eva McCulloch storyline. But then this episode drops. So I had mixed feelings about this episode. There's so much I really enjoyed about this episode. But then there's a lot I really dislike and I have like huge problems with, which I will obviously be discussing during this video and will definitely affect the score that I will give for the episode. So I'm sorry if this episode will end up turning into some sort of a rant because there's a lot I had problems with going into this episode. But that ending as well, we need to talk about that because it's very interesting and it does set up a lot going into graphic novel number 3. But obviously before I get into the breakdown and review itself, spoiler alert, in case you haven't seen the episode, you have been warned because this is a breakdown and review after all, so I'll be going over the episode bit by bit, meaning it will include some spoilers which you certainly wouldn't want to hear from me. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, go watch the episode and come back later for this breakdown. And also be sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you are aware of more Arrowverse content coming your way. Okay, so this episode kicks off right where we left off from last episode, where we have Iris collapsing on the ground due to her being pulled into the real world from last episode, and she's adapted to the Mirrorverse for so long so she cannot respond properly in the real world. And we also have the artificial speed force getting destroyed as well, so Barry is back to using the original dead speed force, and obviously we have Team Flash getting knocked out besides Barry. Now we then have Cisco, Frost and Allegra waking up and they approach Barry slowly, with Cisco aiming his blaster right at Barry because they don't know that Barry has come to his senses yet. But that is until Barry turns around crying and he pleads the team for help, and they obviously assist him because they notice that Barry is back to his normal state. So Iris is being taken care of by Caitlin, and we find out that Iris has basically adapted to the Mirrorverse for so long. She isn't used to being in the real world, which is why she is responding the way she is. Now we have Barry apologizing to the team. He's just instantly forgiven. Now I'm going to let that slide because Barry wasn't in his right mind, so I do understand why he's forgiven so quickly. But again, I did have a bit problems with it as well. But as I said, I'm going to let that slide because Barry wasn't in his right mind when he did those things. Now Cisco and Caitlin mentioned that they want to get the artificial speed force back and they want to fix it so it doesn't end up screwing with Barry again. But Barry doesn't want the artificial speed force because he doesn't want to end up being emotionless again. He doesn't want that risk. Barry wants something which will actually give him his speed back. So in other words, reviving the original speed force because that's the only other option that there is. Now the thing about this episode is that it was rushed, and it was really rushed, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just that they wanted to actually get into the season 7 stuff and actually wrap up this Mirror Master storyline really quickly. Personally, this storyline should have had at least one more episode because there's a lot that needed to be wrapped up, and I just thought this episode was all over the place. It was really messy and it would have definitely benefited with one more episode, I believe. But there's panic going on in CCPD, and we basically get these phone calls where parents say that other versions of their daughters and stuff aren't themselves, and Sue's parents actually come in as well, and they basically talk to Joe about bringing in Sue, in which Joe is confused. But we then have this officer calling Joe for a private talk, and it is Sue in disguise, where she removes her mask and we see that it is Sue. Now Sue basically mentions to Joe that those aren't her parents, they are mirror clones. How this could end up being Eva's doing, in which Joe agrees because he's been getting the same phone calls for the past hour or so. We do also get the reveal that Ralph is helping Sue basically clear her name for Carver's murder. But then we get this mirror hand reaching out for Joe, and Sue basically warns him, and they basically escape on time. Now we then head to the lounge in Star Labs, and Team Flash basically come up with a plan to stop Eva from doing her plans. And she can travel through any reflective surface. That is what Cisco said, so she is very powerful. And Barry tells Cisco to call Joe and basically ask to black out the whole city and close down the lights, because she cannot travel through like reflective surfaces because the room is dark, meaning it's not reflective anymore, so she cannot travel through those. So that's where the idea comes from. Now we have Iris in the med bay once again, and we have Allegra talking to Iris and basically tries to get her to wake up. Why is this scene even here? I don't understand. This scene was so unnecessary. We didn't even need this. These 2 minutes that were wasted could have been utilized a lot better, in my opinion. I just don't see the relevance of the scene. This episode could have really benefited if they got rid of that scene and did something else with those 2 minutes. It was very unnecessary. But Cisco is initiating the shutdown, in which the Star Labs is getting blacked out, so Eva cannot pass through these reflective surfaces because it's dark, so it no longer becomes reflective, as I said before. Now you have to understand, there's lighting for us as the audience, so we could actually see what's happening. But for them, it should almost be pitch black. But Barry looks at a window and suddenly he's gone, and Team Flash is wondering where he went. And we find out that Eva actually pulled him into McCulloch Tech. How? Like, you black out Star Labs so she cannot travel through reflective surfaces, and yet Barry still gets pulled in. That makes no sense at all. Barry basically confronts Eva, telling her that he's going to stop her, and Eva mentions that they aren't enemies. Everything she's doing is basically for the good of this world, and she basically tries manipulating Barry, and she's like, she could do things which Barry can't even do, so why is Barry trying to stop her in the first place? Now Barry then returns back to Star Labs, but the thing is, Team Flash just welcome him like it's normal. Why wasn't Barry questioned whether he's a mirror clone or not? Because he's been sucked into the mirror for a reason. So I do not understand why he wasn't questioned. I'm going to guess mainly because they just didn't have enough time to wrap up the storyline properly, but who knows. But Barry obviously mentions to the team that they cannot defeat Eva. Now Barry is then alone in this dark room in the lounge, and Harrison Wells shows up. And again, for the sake of the plot and to rush the storyline, he has the memories of the other versions of Wells due to the Wells particles going into that one Harrison Wells that isn't dead. So these Wellses are dead, but he still has the memories of these Wells. I don't mind that as much. In fact, I don't have a problem with it that much. But Barry is confused, and he's wondering how there's a Wells out there, in which, as I said before, these Wells particles basically move to the original doppelganger. But we get this nice moment with Barry and the Wells, where basically Barry mentions that this was the version of Wells which he looked up to growing up, which was something I really liked. And Team Flash are then in shock when they walk into the lounge and see that a Harrison Wells is right in front of them. And Allegra is obviously in shock as well because she thinks that it's Nash, in which we have the Wells explaining how he is there. But we then cut to CCPD, and Joe notices that holes have been torn from the newspapers which were used to black out the reflective surfaces basically. And we then have this mirror cop showing up, and she basically confronts Cecile and Joe, and we have Cecile and Joe running into Barry's lab, and they just shut the door and lock it. Now Wells explains how he's there to the team, in which we then have Ralph arriving, and it was a pretty weird way to bring him back, but it did work, I guess. But yeah, Ralph is all fried up and he's basically burning, but he was able to clear Sue Dearborn's name, and Cisco mentions that he's going to take Ralph so he could basically fix him up, if you will. Now Barry is then talking to Iris, and Barry talks about how he misses her and that he wants her to wake up. And Barry touches Iris, and there's this jolt of blue lightning. Iris slowly comes to her senses. Now this is basically the connection between Barry and Iris, which we've witnessed throughout the show before. Now Barry basically finds out that his love basically is the key to reviving the original Speed Force, and that he needs to use all that love within him to basically channel the Speed Force and to get it to work. Because as Wells said, the Speed Force is an infinite source of energy, so it's impossible for it to die. So Barry is going to use that love within him to essentially power up the Speed Force and revive it like that. Which makes sense. I know a lot of people had problems with using Iris as that, plot device. But I thought it makes sense because Barry is the paragon of love in which they mentioned. And I like that, opposition between how Thawne and him using his negativity to power the negative Speed Force. And Barry uses that love and positivity within him to basically revive his original Speed Force. So that was something I really liked, although a lot of people had issues with it. But also, Iris has some residue of the Speed Force as well, which was a hint to that episode where Iris became a speedster. But I do not get how she has that residue of the Speed Force. I still don't understand that. So that is a bit of a nitpick over there. But again, I'll let that slide because it's one of the minor issues that I had about this episode. But we then have the team gathered at the Speed Lab, and Iris just ignites the fusion sphere. Like, she just walks out of nowhere. She just goes to the fusion sphere and just powers it up, which was another problem I had with the episode. But we then get that jolt of lightning and the fusion sphere ignites. Now Barry once again runs around the Speed Lab, and he basically taps into all that love and positivity within him, and Barry gets his speed back. So that was something, as I said before, I really liked. Now yes, I did have a problem with the start of the episode, but there were a lot of things I really liked about this episode, as I said in the intro. But the original Speed Force is revived basically, and Barry gets his speed back. So we did have another key thing as well, but I'll go over that towards the end, and it is related to that scene. More specifically related to what Wells was looking at. But back at CCPD, Joe tries to get Cecile to safety, and Cecile ends up in the Mirrorverse, and Mirror Cecile basically manipulates Joe into tempting him to go into the Mirrorverse as well. But we then have the Flash confronting Eva, and he basically saves a couple of people in need, and we have Vibe blasting as well, and he just appears in this new costume. Something I really like. Cisco has returned as a version of Vibe, if you will, which was pretty sick. I really liked that. Now I know he uses a tech to do so, but I really like what they did with Cisco over here. But then an icing on the cake with that, we had OG Team Flash standing side by side together. I really like that. And we then get this great fight scene with OG Team Flash and the Mirror Master clones. And I really dig the slow motion scenes with Barry. We also had that scene where Barry goes up the roof and he throws lightning with both hands in like a tornado form. It was absolutely epic to see. I really like that. One problem though, the music. I absolutely hate dialogue music with action sequences. In my opinion, it never works. There has never been one time where I saw a show or a movie which had an action sequence but then had dialogue music with it and they fit together. There's never been one time which I've seen that. And yeah, the music was a massive criticism for this scene as well. I really didn't like that dialogue music for the fight scene. But probably my biggest issue from that fighting, you can clearly see the stunt doubles' faces. They put no effort at all into covering up the faces to make it look like Efrat Dor's mirror clones. They just put a stunt double in, they just basically made them do all the action sequences. So that's another issue I had as well. Now Eva then mentions that she isn't the enemy, however Barry has chosen his side and they face off. Now Eva tries using her powers, but Iris can control the mirrors as well. Once again, I really like that, and I do understand why they gave Iris temporary powers, if you will, because she loses them at the end. But Iris then gives this motivational speech to Eva in which she talks her out of doing what she was about to do and basically destroy what she's doing and basically rebuild it. Now I'm all for redemption. That is something I really like seeing. So when the villain gets redeemed, I do kind of like it. Like, I did like what they did with Earth 2 Laurel on Arrow. And Eva, after all, wasn't a full-on main villain in the first place, so it did work for her. And we have never seen that happen for a big bad, so that was something I liked, as it was a different change. And Eva basically tries to stop the clones, but it does not work, and her powers aren't just strong enough, in which we have Barry and Iris just joining forces, and they basically hold hands to each other, and it works. The mirror clones are gone, and the people trapped in the Mirrorverse are back in the real world. Eva goes back to the Mirrorverse to fix what she has done and basically rebuild the Mirrorverse and make it a better place. Now, one thing which was very weird again is that we have Wells leaving, and he is going to use his abilities to basically continuously relive that moment which he had with Tess Morgan. And he basically has this ability to basically transport himself from another time period to another. So although we do know that he will be coming back at some point, we do have Wells leaving, so that ending isn't really a problem. But really, why introduce him as a cliffhanger from last episode and bring him in if you're going to make him leave and come back later? That just doesn't make sense. So I do wish that they handled Wells a bit better, but again, I don't mind, because we do know that we will be seeing Wells back. But we did also have Ralph Dibny's storyline being wrapped up, where we have him wearing this robot helmet, which was quite weird again. And we find out that he's traveling with Sue to basically take down more organizations, because Black Hole isn't the only organization out there. But obviously, through set photos, we knew this storyline was going to happen, and we knew it was the one that they're going for. But we then cut to the scene where Barry was getting his speed back, and we see the multiple different lightning colors scattering across the city. And this is the introduction of the Force Quest. So the one on the top left, the red lightning, is the Strength Force. And the one blue is the Sage Force. The one in green is the Still Force. And the one in yellow is the Speed Force. And I will go over this more in depth for a video tomorrow, where I will be breaking down this ending scene for this episode, because it is very interesting and it does play a very pivotal role going into graphic novel number 3. But overall, this was a very messy episode. It was really rushed, and there's a lot of things which I really didn't like the bad parts were awfully done, but the things that were good were insane. They did really well. So I do understand if people say this was an awful episode, because the things that they did bad, they did awfully. But I'm more along the lines of like a 6.5 out of 10. So it was a pretty decent episode. But yeah, this is officially graphic novel number 2 being wrapped up, and I cannot wait to see what we have planned for graphic novel number 3, having this Force Quest introduced. But yeah guys, thanks for watching. If you guys have enjoyed the video, please give a like and subscribe. Tell me in the comment section down below what you guys think about this episode. And yeah, I will see you guys in my next video.